Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel IFI Studio. In today's video, we are diving into the world of serverless APIs with AWS Lambda and API Gateway. You will learn how to build, deploy, and manage your own serverless APIs. I'll also show you how to get it all set up and running in just minutes using native AWS Lambda and also using API Gateway service. So let's jump right in. So before I even start this video, if you are mainly interested in the implementation, feel free to skip ahead to the timeline mentioned on the screen. But if you stick around for a bit, I can promise that this API intro is quick, fun, and totally worth it. So let's get started. So I'm sure that you have probably come across this textbook definition before multiple times, but still, to define an API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it lets different software systems to talk to each other. Or if this is the first time hearing about an API, no worries. Let me explain it in a way that actually makes sense. Now, while that definition is technically correct, it doesn't really explain how API works in real life. So think of an API as a set of rules and protocols that allow different software application or clients to communicate and exchange information with the other applications or a server. Kind of like having a common language the both understands, the client and the server, or between two applications. And the best part is that they don't need to know how the other one is built internally. And this is the whole concept behind an API. But if it still sounds a little abstract, don't worry. I'm not just dropping the theory on you and walking away. Let's break it down visually and really get a feel of like how an API actually works. Now let's break it down visually and really get a feel for how an API actually works. Now welcome to the Astro Cafe. Pun definitely intended. Imagine you are a customer at the space themed cafe, but instead of coffee and croissants, you are a software application and you need some data or a service. Now, here is how it works. The whole system is divided into three parts: the client, the API, and the server. Now, client is that's you, and you are sitting at a table, and this is your application, maybe on a phone or a laptop, and you don't go into the kitchen yourself. Instead, you place an order, and this is your request. Now, it could be like for information like, hey, give me all the items on a menu, or hey, show me all the available planets, or add this user to the database, any sort of request. Now, this request isn't taken forward by the API, which is the waiter in this scenario, and it delivers to the kitchen, which is the API server, and then bring the response back to you. Now, you don't need to know how the kitchen operates, or what ingredients they use, or which chef is working the shift. Now, the waiter handles all that complexity behind the scenes. And once this request is taken by the waiter or the API to the server, now your request is in the kitchen, and API server is where the actual work happens. Now it could involve talking to a database, processing logic, or generating some output based on a request. And once it's done cooking up what you ask for, it hands it back to the waiter, which is the API, who then brings it straight to your table. And that's a cycle. You, the client, make a request, the API waiter forwards it, and the API server kitchen processes it, and then the response is served back to you. And you never had to go inside the kitchen, and you just got exactly what you need, and all thanks to the API. And this is exactly how software system communicates in the real world through APIs. They help one system order something from other, and without needing to understand the internals of how it's prepared. So now you have got a clearer picture of how an API works. Let's take a quick flash look at why APIs are so crucial and what they teach us about building smarter and decoupled systems. Communication. Now, APIs enable communication between systems, which means APIs act as bridges that allow different software or apps or platforms to talk to each other. Now, without APIs, systems would be isolated and unable to share data or functionality. So, APIs definitely teaches us that collaboration is the key. Even in tech, things need a common language to work together. Abstraction. Now, APIs simplify complex operations. As we have already discussed, that APIs hide the complex logic behind simple interfaces. Example, one API call can trigger hundreds of backend steps, and developers only need to know what to ask for, not how it's processed internally. So, definitely, abstraction is powerful. You don't need to know everything to get things done efficiently. Innovative. APIs enable innovation and speed. APIs allow developers to build on top of existing tools and services, for example, Google Maps, Paytm, or Spotify APIs, and this helps create new applications faster without reinventing the wheel. And this definitely teaches us reusability and modularity, and thus driving innovation. Secure. Now, APIs ensure secure and controlled access. APIs manage what data or functionality is accessible and keeping the system secure and scalable. Now, with this proper authentication in place, only authorized users can interact with the system. So, it teaches us that security and boundaries are essential in every kind of interactions, even digital ones. Now, that's all with the explanation and know how of APIs, how APIs works. Now, let's straight dive down into the implementation where we will be straight jumping into the AWS Management Console and implementing a solution. All right. So, as you can see on the left hand side of your screen, there is a simple list of tasks that we'll follow step by step to build our serverless API using AWS Lambda and API Gateway. Task 1, sign into your AWS Management Console. Task 2, create a new Lambda function. And 3, test the function using input parameters. Now, this is the phase 1 of the implementation. And then after that, we'll see that how we can attach APIs using different methods. But before we dive into task 1, here's something important to note. While we are using API Gateway or in general APIs to trigger a Lambda function in this tutorial, it's definitely not the only way to do so. So there are several other AWS services that can invoke Lambda function and they are flashing on your screen right now. You can go ahead and pause the video if you would like to take a closer look. All right. So I'm in my AWS Management Console. So as a part of task 1, let's just first create a Lambda function. I'm gonna give a meaningful name or select a recent version. Create. Awesome. So now that our Lambda function is created, what we're going to do is we are going to write a simple code which is going to extract some parameters or the key value pairs out of the event. And then once we have those, we can pass it to the JSON body and which will be serving as a response. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is first, as I mentioned, we'll try this locally. Locally, I mean to say by creating a sample test event. And then later on, we'll be integrating this with an API and try to test this using a third-party tool such as Postman, Curl, or I'm using Echo API, which is a online API collaboration platform to test our APIs. So for that matters, let's just go ahead and just let's create two parameters, name and city, which we will be extracting from the event. So attribute name is equal to that's no and simple name, and attribute city event city. Once we have this, let's change this. That's it. So we go ahead and deploy this, and then what we're going to do is we are going to test a Lambda function. So click on test, and if this is your first time coming in your Lambda function, then you won't be having any test events. So go ahead and create a new test event. Test, and then in here, as we are expecting attribute name and city, then it will only fetch name and city. But let me do one thing more. Instead of this, let me use getter get name. And if we get name, then use name. Otherwise, let's make it guest. And let's do the same for the city. We are expecting city. If no, then unspecified location. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy this. Now, what will happen if we just run this, try to run this event, let's just do not pass name and the city. And if we try to test this, and what will happen, even though this Lambda is not going to fail because it was expecting name, but as we are using getter functionality of JSON, now we are saying that if in case name is not there, then use the default values, which is guest and I live in unspecified location. Now let's just try to pass the actual values, name and city. Name, I'll use my name and city, and let's save it. And once we save, let's try to invoke this too. Now, if you see, the response has been changed. My name is the value from the event, which is name, and I live in Pune, which is value of the city. Great. Okay. So now as our Lambda function is ready, let's try to attach an API to this Lambda function. And as I previously mentioned that there are two ways we'll be targeting for this video. One, by using the native Lambda function URL, and second, by making use of the AWS API gateway. So let's first see the native Lambda function URL, how it works. So for that, if you need to set up Lambda function URL, and this is the by far the simplest way you can activate this Lambda function and expose this Lambda function to an API. So for this, all you have to do is you have to go to configuration, and inside the configuration, you will see an option of function URL. Click on function URL and go ahead and create a function URL. Now inside this, you'll get two options. One, if you want to make this IAM authorized. What do you mean by IAM authorized? It's nothing but adding additional layer of security so that even if this API is exposed to like public, they won't be able to directly use this API to get the information or even invoke the Lambda function, because IAM just set some rules and expectations for that API to follow. And if that expectation is not met, then it basically doesn't invoke the endpoint. And here you can either create a new role, a user specific role, or you can add some tags or resources like which all services can access a Lambda function, or just apply some clauses such as get resource. There should be a specific string or tags. There are numerous possibilities to it, but that's not the scope of this video. The scope is to let you understand like what are the ways we can attach a URL or an API or expose the Lambda function to an API. So for that, just go ahead with none type, and that's it. You need not to make any other change other than this none type and hit save button. And now once you hit save button, within seconds, you will be seeing one additional field over here which says function URL. And this function URL will help you invoking this Lambda function from anywhere on the internet if it is not backed by IAM. So what we are going to do is we'll copy this URL and we'll open a new tab and paste this URL. Now on pasting this URL, we can actually pass the post parameters here as well. So here AWS, let's just start our post parameters, and on this, as you remember, we have name and city. So I'll go with the name, same ship, and city. For a change, I'll put Mumbai. Great. And as you can see that even after passing the right parameters, we didn't get the default response. And I deliberately didn't tell you earlier because I want to make this video informative and a good learning for you, so that you should have an answer to everything by the end of this video. So the reason why we did not get the specific values in this API response, because the JSON response which we use to test the Lambda function initially, that's not the HTTPS response in general. That's not the default HTTPS response, because in an HTTPS response or HTTP response, there are certain fields under which we get the values, such as query string parameters, raw string query, or a body, and there's a JSON message, and there's headers. So that's the API specific. And if you see, we are directly searching for name, and when this request will be coming from the internet, the HTTPS request, you won't be getting the parameters you are expecting directly in this response. You have to fetch those parameters. So in order to understand even more, we'll monitor like what kind of request we are getting. So for that, the easiest way is to print an event. So if you print an event, the incoming event, we can easily get to know that what's happening in your API. So for that, we'll deploy this Lambda function, and then we'll try to invoke this API one more time. Now, if we invoke this API one more time, if we go back to Lambda function and hit monitor tab, you'll see an option called view CloudWatch logs. Now we are making use of another service just to understand what's actually going wrong. And this is a very good habit, because in this way, you will be able to understand like what all services we can use in couple with Lambda or another API services, or to actually understand what's actually going on in the background. So we'll try to access the latest log, and as you can see, we have printed the event, and inside this event, if you try to search for my name, because we were sending our name, so we are getting name in two places. One as raw query string, and second in form of query string parameters. So instead of directly extracting the name, we will be extracting query string parameters, and then inside the query string parameters, we can access the city and the name. So let's go back and modify a Lambda function. So now instead of let me just why so difficult? Okay. Instead of getting name and guess, let's get the query string parameters first. So get, there'll be another getter dot get, and inside this we'll search for query string parameters, and as it's a dictionary, we'll be also giving a default type for query string parameters. So now if you can see, we are first getting the query string parameters from the event, and then from the query string parameters, we are again using a getter function to get the listed values or the key value pair, which is name and city. Let's go ahead and deploy this function. And if you go back and try to re-invoke this, bingo. This time we got a correct response, which is, hi, my name is Shubhan, I live in Mumbai. So this worked, and you have also learned that how to debug Lambda function for the user who are visiting this or learning this for the first time. This is a really good information to possess, and for the seasoned users, this might be a good piece of information. But yeah, if you already know about it, then good for you. So now that we have seen how to expose a Lambda function using Lambda URLs, which is quick and easy, it's time to learn how to do it the more powerful and customizable way using Amazon API Gateway. So let's go ahead and open the API Gateway service from the AWS console and just search for API Gateway and click into it. So once we are inside, I'll guide you through all the steps needed to create an actual working API. So let's get started. So this is the landing page, and you'll see a button called Create an API. Just click on it, and then select the option with REST API and hit on Build button. You need to give it a name. So like Lambda, we'll call it as Try API, and great. So we have now created an API, but that is just the skeleton. Now, to make this API functional, we still need to add a few key components. And don't worry, I'm going to explain each of these components as we create them, so you know what's happening under the hood. So let's build it step by step. Um, so whenever you create a skeleton of an API, the very first thing you need to create is a resource. Now, what is a resource? A resource is like a path in your API. For example, many a times you have seen, right? There is an API URL, and then you put in slash, and then you add something such as a path. For example, a user, API slash user, API slash customer, API slash movies. So all these things, categories, are actually the resource path, and think of it like a folder or a root. So for this we'll create a simple resource because we don't have a hard fast categories associated with the lambda function, so we'll just create res. We'll call it a res. Oh, sorry, this is not the place where you edit. So we'll call it res, and we'll click on create a resource. So now, when we'll create an endpoint to this API, and we need to hit this API, the format will be the link of an API slash res slash the actual query parameters. So it's not going to be like API slash directly query parameters, which was a case with Lambda function. Great. So once the resource is created, now we have to create a method. Now, what is a method? Now, method is that HTTP term you use a lot, like, for example, get, put, post, delete, update. So these are the methods associated with an API. So you have created an API, but what you want to do with an API, right? So that's a method. So method is like, it's like an operation linked to a specific backend activity. So here, we'll create a method, and for this we'll just simply use the get method because we are just providing some items and getting some result in return. So get lambda function, and then leave everything as it is and create a method. Okay. uh, we missed one part: integration. So what is an integration? Now we have created a method called get. Now we also have to create an integration. Now an integration is like a bridge between your method and the backend service. So for example, if you have added a method called get, where it is going to hit, so that's the integration or an endpoint. So if you come down, so integration type, we have chosen lambda function. So we need to specify which lambda function we are referring to. So we'll select our try lambda function, and then we'll create a method. Awesome. So we have created a resource, then we have created a method. uh, Bingo. Enough of the theory. Let's just go ahead and just try this, invoke this API, and see how it goes. In order to invoke this API, first we need to deploy an API. So always remember, you cannot try or test you cannot get an actual URL to an API till the time you actually deploy it. So what we'll do is we'll hit the deploy API button, and while deploying, you need to give it a stage. So what's a stage? So stage is something, you can think of it as a version of your API. So there are different environments like dev, prod, QA, test, different environments. So you can actually stage your APIs accordingly, and give a tag to an API that this API is corresponding to dev environment, or we need to test this API in the prod or QA. So that's dev, that's stage. So click on new stage, we'll call it as dev, and deploy. Now once you deploy it, you will get an invocation URL. Now it's time to test this API. So we'll copy this API, go to the client that I mentioned earlier, Echo API. I'm going to use this, hit on HTTP response, and paste the URL, and slash. Always remember that we need to provide the name of the resource. Other than that, it will always give you an error. So for example, our resource is res, and after that we have to provide query parameters. So go to body and go to raw, and then you had name, and what we'll call it as show, and slash city, and we'll call it as, hold on. Sweet. So we have sent the response. The good thing, okay, I have two news, one good and another bad. Good news is that we successfully invoked the API, so our API is working correctly. Bad news is, even though we have done everything in the right format correctly, but still we have received the message, "Hi, my name is Kes and I live in unspecified location." That's not good, right? So let's go back to our Lambda function and check that what's going wrong. So what we're going to do is we'll go back to our Lambda function. And if you remembered, we had CloudWatch attached to the Lambda, right? So we go to monitor, go to the go to view CloudWatch logs. First, try to invoke this API from here, test this API from here. Okay, we are able to invoke the API, but let's see if there is a stream for this. Ah, bingo. All right. So we wired everything up, added a method, connected it to a Lambda function, and deployed an API. We tested it, and boom, it fails. But don't worry, this is one of the most important things to understand when working with API Gateway and Lambda. And this is the difference between Lambda proxy integration and non-proxy integration. And I deliberately didn't tell you about this earlier because I wanted you to understand that if you are doing this for the first time and if someone, like doesn't tell you about this and then there are 80 to 90% of the chance that you are definitely going to get into this problem or you won't be able to figure out like what's going wrong. So this is a typical case of proxy versus non-proxy integration. So let's go back to the API and I'll explain you like what went wrong actually. So what happens, first we'll delete this method get and we'll create another method, the same method get, and same thing lambda function, and we'll point it to the lambda function. There is this single button, a switch which says lambda proxy integration, and the by the definition it says send the request to a lambda function as a structured event. Now let me quickly break down something which is the difference between proxy and non-proxy integration. Now, in simpler words, think of it like passing a message. So imagine that API gateway is a receptionist at a hotel. A guest and a user just makes a request to the receptionist that, hey, I want something in my room and for the room service. And the receptionist, which is API gateway, needs to pass that message to the corresponding department, such as kitchen or laundry. But there are two ways this can happen. One, when the Lambda proxy integration is enabled. So if this Lambda proxy integration is enabled, everything is sent in one package. So when proxy integration is on, API gateway sends the entire HTTP request to Lambda, which includes the headers, query parameters, method, body, path, the whole thing, which is wrapped neatly inside a JSON event. And it's like, hey, this is everything. Do whatever you want to with the request. I don't care. And which is great actually. I don't know why this option is disabled by default because this should be enabled by default because this is something that we usually do when we usually get a complete API HTTP response rather than a tailored response. So I don't know why this option is kept as disabled by default, but we need to enable this. But what happens if we disable this option? So if the non-proxy integration, it's a non-proxy integration, which means it's not enabled. Then in this mode, API gateway manually constructs the input. So that means you have to tell the API gateway that what requests you are going to get, what requests you are going to send it to the server, and what requests you are going to get back from the server, and then what request we are actually going to send it to the client. So you have to model everything. So there is a format which I'll show you in a bit. First, we'll turn it on and then create a method. Great. So now that we have created a method, let's just first try to invoke this API, and then I'll make you understand the other things. So we'll do the similar thing. First, as we have made changes, let's deploy this API on dev. Perfect. So we have deployed the API. Let's just first test this. So doing the same name and city Pune. If it tests, then sweet. Oh, did I? Oh, yep. City. Perfect. Hi, my name is Shubh and I live in Pune. Bingo. So now it works. So now you know that you have to switch on the integration to proxy mode, which lets the Lambda returns, like which makes a complete request to the Lambda instead of a tailored response. And so if you turn it off, which I was telling you earlier, you need to formulate everything. So you need to, as I mentioned, that we do not need to do anything in here. So this is the exact place where you have to create a model. So you have to go to the models, you have to create a model, then you have to select a model in the request tab. And once you select the model in the request tab, then you have to formulate an API, tailor a response, and send it back to the Lambda function. And then Lambda function will understand, okay. And in that case, you won't be getting such a wild west kind of API request. You'll be getting a very specific kind of API request, which you have seen in the form of function URLs that you attach to the Lambda function, right? So that's the difference between the proxy and the non-proxy. And our test failed because we use the non-proxy integration, but our Lambda is returning a proxy-style response. And API gateway doesn't know how to handle that unless we tell the API gateway what to do with this response by mapping the response. So yeah, so this completes our tutorial, and I hope you learned like a couple of things with this integration, and I'm excited that you'll be using this integration in one of your projects or in your exploration journey. So that's all for the video. I'll see you in the next. Thank you.